All right, let's go.
Number 10. The Campanian ignimbrite, the eruption that killed the Neanderthals. Around 39,000 years ago, a supervolcano beneath what is now the Campi Flegrei caldera in southern Italy produced one of the largest eruptions in European history. The Campanian ignimbrite event released approximately 300 cubic kilometers of material. Ash fell across an area stretching from the Atlantic coast to the Black Sea. In parts of Eastern Europe, the ash layer is still 30 centimeters thick. The eruption happened at the precise moment when modern humans were pushing into Europe and Neanderthals were making their final stand. The Neanderthals had survived in Europe for over 200,000 years. They were not primitive. They buried their dead, made tools, survived conditions that would kill most modern humans. But here is where the story becomes genuinely disturbing. The Campanian ignimbrite ash layer appears at site after site across Eastern Europe as a boundary. Below it, Neanderthal tools. Above it, modern human tools. No Neanderthal site in the affected zone shows clear occupation after the event. Within a few thousand years, essentially immediate in geological terms, the Neanderthals were gone. Did the eruption destroy the ecosystems that sustained them, collapse their already fragmented populations, and leave them unable to recover against a competing species expanding from the south? The evidence increasingly says yes. The Campi Flegrei system is still active today. It sits beneath a metropolitan area of 3 million people. In 2023, Italian authorities raised its alert level. The same volcanic system that may have ended one human species is still pressurizing. Still waiting.
Number 9. Hekla 3, the volcano that froze the Bronze Age. In approximately 1159 BC, confirmed by Greenland ice core analysis, the Icelandic volcano Hekla produced one of its largest eruptions of the Holocene. It injected massive quantities of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, spreading globally and reflecting sunlight for years. Tree ring records from Ireland, England, Siberia, and North America all show the same signature. Dramatic growth ring narrowing beginning around 1159 BC and continuing for approximately 18 years. 18 years of cold summers. 18 years of failed harvests. The tree rings are physical records. They do not lie. But here is where the human cost becomes staggering. The period between 1200 and 1150 BC is already known as the Bronze Age collapse, the most comprehensive civilizational failure in recorded history. The Mycenaeans fell. The Hittites fell. Ugarit was destroyed and never rebuilt. Hekla 3 occurred directly within this window. A prolonged agricultural crisis, landing on top of already stressed palace economies, may have been the final trigger. The volcano that helped end the Bronze Age erupts on average every 50 to 100 years. Its most recent significant eruption was in 2000. The next eruption is not a question of if, it is a question of when. Number 8. The Black Sea Flood, the catastrophe behind the myth. In 1997, marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman of Columbia University proposed something extraordinary. Around 5,600 BC, the Black Sea was a freshwater lake surrounded by inhabited shorelines. Then, the natural barrier at the Bosphorus gave way. Mediterranean seawater poured through. Ryan and Pittman estimated the inflow at approximately 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls, raising the Black Sea by tens of meters and drowning tens of thousands of square kilometers within months. The people on those shores had no meaningful warning. The water rose. The land disappeared. But here's where the story cracks open into something much larger. The Black Sea flood of 5,600 BC is a leading candidate for the origin of the Great Flood myths in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Hebrew Bible, and dozens of independent Near Eastern traditions. The event was real. The displacement was real. The memory, encoded in mythology for thousands of years, may be the longest surviving eyewitness account in human history. We have been reading the memory of a real catastrophe for 3,000 years and calling it mythology. Explorer Robert Ballard's team reported structures on the Black Sea floor in 2000. Stone tools, wooden beams, remnants of a world that drowned 8,000 years ago. The Black Sea is anoxic below 150 meters. Organic material does not decompose. The houses are still down there. The water is 2,000 meters deep, but the houses are still down there. Number 7. The Indus Valley Drought, when 5 million people lost their river. Around 2200 BC, the monsoon system over South Asia began to fail. The Ghaggar-Hakra River network, which watered the agricultural heartland of the Indus Valley civilization, began to dry. Not flood, not shift, simply dry. The Indus Valley civilization at its peak housed 5 million people across 1,500 settlements, the largest civilization on Earth. Cities with sewage systems, standardized bricks, and a writing system we still cannot read. It had functioned for 700 years. Between 1900 and 1700 BC, it ceased to function. But here is where the scale of the tragedy becomes visible. There are no burned cities, no mass graves, no evidence of military invasion. The Indus civilization did not fall to an enemy. It dried out.
5 million people abandoning cities, not in panic, but in slow, inexorable waves, leaving when the wells ran dry, when the harvests failed for the third consecutive year, when the river that had always been there simply was not there anymore. The 4.2 kiloyear climate event appears to have simultaneously destabilized the Akkadian Empire and the Old Kingdom of Egypt. 3 of the 4 most sophisticated civilizations on Earth destabilized simultaneously by a shift in rainfall patterns. Their drainage channels are still intact in the soil of Pakistan and India. The rivers that made them possible are gone. The 5 million people who left have no clear cultural descendants anyone can point to.
Number 6. The Storegga Slide and Doggerland, the tsunami that erased a country. Around 6,200 BC, approximately 3,500 cubic kilometers of seafloor sediment shifted off the coast of Norway. The Storegga submarine landslide generated a tsunami that struck the coastlines of Norway and Scotland with waves between 10 and 25 meters high. But the worst impact was not on the coastlines. It was on Doggerland, a landmass the size of Great Britain, connecting Britain to continental Europe across what is now the North Sea. Fertile, inhabited, home to hunter-gatherer communities for thousands of years. The tsunami struck Doggerland when it was already being slowly drowned by rising sea levels. When it hit, it traveled far inland across flat terrain with nothing to stop it. But here is what makes this catastrophe uniquely haunting. This was not a sudden destruction. Doggerland had been slowly drowning for thousands of years before the tsunami.
The people there had watched the sea advance their entire lives. Their grandparents had told stories of land now underwater. The coastlines they grew up with had shifted within their lifetimes. The tsunami was the final act of a catastrophe that had been in progress for millennia. When the North Sea trawl nets drag across the Dogger Bank today, they occasionally bring up worked flint, animal bones, and human remains. The country is still down there. The people are still down there. 8,000 years in cold, anoxic sediment, and the sea has not given them back.
Number 5. The Younger Dryas Impact, the Black Layer, and the Death of Megafauna. In 2007, archaeologist James Kennett and colleagues published research proposing that approximately 12,900 years ago, a fragmented comet or asteroid struck or exploded over the northern hemisphere. The evidence: a thin dark layer present in sediments across 4 continents containing nanodiamonds, microspherules, and iridium, markers associated with extraterrestrial impact. The timing is exact. The North American megafauna, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, American horses, camels, disappeared within centuries of this layer. The Clovis culture, the earliest well-documented human culture in the Americas, vanished from the archaeological record at the same moment. And the climate lurched back into near-glacial conditions for 1,200 years. But here is where the nightmare becomes personal. 12,900 years ago is not ancient in the geological sense. The humans who witnessed this were anatomically identical to us. They had art, language, tools, social structure. They watched the sky do something catastrophic. They watched the animals disappear. They watched the cold return. The black layer is still there.
in sediment cores from California to Belgium to Syria. A thin, dark line at exactly 12,900 years ago that marks the moment something hit, and coincided with the disappearance of an entire fauna and a human culture. Scientists still argue about the exact mechanism. Nobody argues about the layer. It is in the ground beneath your feet right now, if you drill down far enough.
Number 4. The Bronze Age collapse. 50 years that ended everything. Around 1200 BC, the Eastern Mediterranean was the most interconnected, most sophisticated region on Earth. The Mycenaean Greeks, the Hittite Empire, the Egyptian New Kingdom, the Ugaritic city-state, all linked by trade routes, diplomatic marriages, and a palace economy functioning for centuries. Within 50 years, between 1200 and 1150 BC, virtually every single one collapsed, simultaneously. Pylos burned. Hattusa was abandoned. Ugarit was destroyed and never rebuilt. The Mycenaean palace system ceased to exist. But here is where the nightmare crystallizes. We don't know why. After a century of scholarship, no single explanation satisfies the evidence. Archaeologist Eric Klein's 2014 analysis argues the collapse resulted from simultaneous stressors: drought, disrupted trade, internal instability, and migrating populations, all hitting an overextended interconnected system at once. Sound familiar? An over-integrated global system. Climate stress, political instability, supply chain disruption, mass migration. The Bronze Age collapse is a documented case study in how a sophisticated civilization can go from functional to non-existent within a single human generation. The last letter from Ugarit, written as enemy ships appeared offshore, reads, "The enemy ships are here. They have set fire to my towns. My father, know that our country is abandoned." The letter never arrived. The city was already gone.
Number 3. The Thera eruption, the day the island disappeared. In approximately 1628 BC, confirmed by ice cores and tree rings from California to Ireland, the volcanic island of Thera in the Aegean produced one of the largest eruptions in human history. Approximately 60 cubic kilometers of material. The explosion was heard from Egypt to the Black Sea. The subsequent caldera collapse generated a tsunami, striking northern Crete with waves between 9 and 40 meters. This single event may have done more to shape Western mythology than any other geological event in the past 10,000 years. But here is where ancient memory and the geological record collide. Thera is one of the strongest candidates for the Atlantis story Plato recorded in 360 BC, citing Egyptian priests who described a great island civilization destroyed in a single day and night. The Minoan civilization, a sophisticated maritime empire centered on Crete, with colonies throughout the Aegean, including Thera itself, matches the description. The destruction mechanism matches, and Egyptian priests were positioned to receive the account from Minoan refugees or Mycenaean traders who witnessed the aftermath. The modern island of Santorini is the rim of that caldera. The blue-domed buildings in every Greek travel poster are built on the edge of a crater that was once a populated island. The water in the center of the caldera is 400 meters deep. The bottom of that crater is the ghost of a civilization that may have become the most enduring myth in Western history. Number 2. The 4.2 kiloyear event. 200 years without rain. Around 2200 BC, lake sediments from China to Africa and Greenland ice cores all register the same signal simultaneously, a prolonged aridification event lasting approximately 200 years. Reduced rainfall, failed monsoons, drought across a broad band of the northern hemisphere from China through the Middle East to North Africa. Now look at what was happening to human civilization at exactly this moment. The Akkadian Empire, the world's first true empire, collapsed around 2154 BC. Inscriptions describe crop failures, famine, mass migration. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, which built the Great Pyramid, collapsed around 2181 BC. The centralized pharaonic state that had unified Egypt for 5 centuries fractured, and the Indus Valley civilization began its irreversible decline at the same moment. But here is the full weight of what this means. 3 of the 4 most sophisticated civilizations on Earth in 2200 BC collapsed within decades of each other. Not because of war, not because of political failure alone, because it stopped raining.
A shift in rainfall patterns persisting for 200 years was sufficient to end empires. The people living through those 200 years had no way of knowing it would end. They just knew that the rain had stopped, and the rivers were lower than their grandparents remembered, and the harvests were failing for reasons no human decision could fix. The same global climate system that destabilized 3 civilizations simultaneously is the system we are currently altering at measurable speed.
Number 1. The Toba catastrophe, the event that almost ended us. Approximately 74,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra in what is now Indonesia, the Toba supervolcano erupted. Not in the way that Vesuvius erupted, in the way that ends worlds. The Toba eruption released approximately 2,800 cubic kilometers of material, the largest known volcanic eruption in the past 2 million years. Ash covered South Asia in a layer 1 to 3 meters deep. Sulfur dioxide triggered a volcanic winter lasting 6 to 10 years. Global temperatures dropped an estimated 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. In the most affected regions, far more. This was not a regional catastrophe. This was a planetary event. But here is where the story becomes something that should stop you cold. Genetic analysis of modern human populations reveals a striking bottleneck in genetic diversity occurring at approximately the right time to correspond to the Toba eruption. The analysis suggests the global human population may have been reduced to between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Every human being alive today may be descended from a population small enough to fit in a large auditorium. Not a metaphor. At some point, approximately 74,000 years ago, the human lineage came within reach of extinction. The thread connecting every person who has ever lived ran through a population so small that a single epidemic, a single catastrophic winter, could have ended us permanently. We almost didn't make it. The evidence is in our DNA. We carry the scar of that near extinction in our own genetic code. The Toba caldera is now Lake Toba in Sumatra, 100 kilometers long, 30 kilometers wide. It is a tourist destination. People swim in it. The lake that nearly ended humanity is on travel itineraries. And beneath its floor, the same magmatic system that produced the largest eruption of the past 2 million years is still present, still active. The caldera floor has been rising at measurable rates. The event that came closest to ending us before we truly began is not over. It is resting. 10 catastrophes. 10 moments when the world broke. A volcanic eruption that may have finished the Neanderthals. 18 years of cold that helped collapse the Bronze Age. A flood that drowned a continent and became the oldest myth in human memory. A drought that emptied cities of 5 million people. A tsunami that erased a populated country. A cosmic impact that ended a megafauna and a culture simultaneously. 50 years in which every Mediterranean civilization collapsed at once. A volcanic island that became the myth of Atlantis. 2 centuries without rain that ended 3 empires. And 1 supervolcano that reduced humanity to a few thousand survivors in an ash-covered world. The pattern across all 10 is the same. Complex systems are far more fragile than they appear from the inside. Every civilization that has ever existed experienced itself as stable, as durable, as the natural state of things. Every one of them was wrong. Every one was 1 drought, 1 eruption, 1 century of sustained stress away from dissolution. The Bronze Age palace economy looked invincible in 1300 BC. The Old Kingdom of Egypt looked eternal in 2300 BC. The Indus cities looked permanent in 2500 BC. The catastrophes did not end. The Campi Flegrei is still pressurizing. Toba is still resting. The climate is still shifting. The sea is still rising. We are living inside a window of stability. The question is not whether the window will close. The question is whether we will recognize it closing in time to matter. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.